we are going to start with the terminologies that are associated with fashion. Uh, so, to begin with, we start with what fashion is. Uh, Fashion essentially, when we try to understand fashion, it is essentially something which is a reflection of anything that is happening in the rest of the world. It is a impact done by the rest of the world to the and how fashion is essentially responding to it. So we call it as the reflection of social, political, economic, and artistic forces. Now, what does it mean? It essentially means that anything that is happening around the society or in the politics or in economics uh, is something that impacts fashion. For example, if there is a social movement that is going on, for example, at one point of time there was this hippie movement that was all over the world, and fashion really got impacted by that because the kind of clothing that they would wear, the bell-bottom pants, the tie and dyes, and all those things essentially impacted the mainstream fashion so much that people really started dressing up like that. Or on the other hand, for example, uh, you know, politics or politicians when dress up in a certain way, people start really look up to that. For example, starting from the Nehru jacket, what we call as the Modi jacket in today's days, are all impact of fashion, politics and fashion. It is very evident that how economics uh, plays a role as because higher the economy, the better the economy, the fashion flourishes. Essentially, people have more purchasing power, the consumer buying behavior is on a higher level, and hence the fashion would be on a higher level. On the other hand, when it comes to artistic forces, any art movement, any sort of art, uh, you know, essentially impacts fashion because that is where the elements or the inspirations come in. Now, to be something called as fashionable, it is very important to understand that a majority of people has to accept it as their dressing style or as their way of you know presenting themselves. So it is always something when there is a group of people or a mass of people accept something, we only and only then can call that that item or that thing as fashionable. No, it what does it mean? It means that it can be a clothing, it can be an accessory, shoes, hairstyle, makeup. It can also be body language. It can be a gesture. It can be certain words. So anything that becomes extremely popular are often said to be fashionable. Another very important thing about fashion is that it is constantly changing. So, what was considered acceptable or fashionable at one point of time might not be considered fashionable now. So, fashion is always changing, and it is it it is a very cyclical way of doing it. As we would move forward in the session, we would understand about different fashion cycles and how fashion changes. So, yes, so that is the entire idea about what fashion is. So, we will talk about the history of clothing and fashion in the next sessions, but for today we understand the terms. Second term that becomes very important is style. What is style? Style is something which is very intrinsic to a product. So it can be to a person as well. Something which is very individualistic, very specific, a very important characteristic of a product which will help it distinguish from other products is essentially style. It can be, you know, for any look, any apparel, any accessories. Now, elements that would define a style can be the lines, silhouettes, or any other element of design. As we would again move ahead in this session, we are also going to talk about the different elements of design, and these elements itself, uh, you know, uh, build up the style of a product. Now, Just like fashion, a way of talking or a manner of talking or manner of, you know, the way somebody is can also be considered as style. Uh, it, a product itself, and we say that product has a style. So, for example, if you see the images, there's something like a bubble style, there's something fusion style. We see in this image, you can see essentially an anarkali dress is converted into a shorter length dress, and combined style is created. Coming to the third point, it is what fashion is we call as a trend, fashion trend. Now, what is a trend? It is the direction in which any styles are moving or tending to change. Now, what are these things that might change? The colors, the designs, the silhouette, the fabrics, anything, the direction in which they are changing is essentially a fashion trend. Uh, just like fashion, uh, things around the world, political events, movies, celebrities, all this together essentially influence fashion trends. Now, any fashion item generally are categorized into two types, at least three types of the basic three types. The first type is a classic. It's a classic. Classic is essentially an apparel uh, that is that is there in fashion for a very long time, a very long period of time. It has been there in fashion, or there can be certain designs which are which might have changed a little, but the basic idea that it is that specific garment has remained. So, for example, sari is an attire which has been considered as a classic. Now, the material, the drape, the blouses that you would wear it with can change. We there are so in Bollywood we have seen different drapes like times we have seen Mumtaz would wear it, or now that we see like an opal pallu drape or a pleated up drape. The blouses have actually evolved a lot, but then the idea that it is a long piece of fabric, unstitched fabric, which is draped and pinned together to be held in place is essentially a um, classic. Similarly, another garment that is considered very important classic is a little black dress. The little black dress was designed by Coco de Chanel, and when it was designed in 1920. When it was designed, it was a knee-length dress with full sleeves. Over time, it has evolved. It has the length have gone shorter, at times have gone longer. The sleeves might have gone shorter, sleeveless, strapless, off shoulder. It had seen all, but the idea that it is a black colored dress which is shorter than a conventional length is essentially there. So hence the idea that little black dress has remained a classic. On the other hand, we have something called as fad. What is a fad? A fad is essentially when a garment or a style that becomes extremely popular over a short period of time and then fades quickly. So things like animal prints or this red roots, all these are essentially fads. Now, a very interesting way to segregate between classics and fads is that um, you would often see a fad is a very flashy piece of garment. It is a garment which generally is very, it's very flashy. It is very so animal prints if you see, or even the Bhakti Lisa particular suits which were very colorful. So it grabs attention very quickly, but at the end of the day, it doesn't hold your attention. It goes out of fashion because people use of very flashy things over a very short time. Hence, uh, the design changes. Coming to the next term, which we call as consumer. Consumer is essentially is the person who is buying and eventually using the product or the merchandise. Uh, it is very important to understand the consumer because consumer essentially, uh, influences the market. They decide how the you know the design will look like, how the what sort of products, how many pieces, what sort of colors, and what should be the style that should be there. That becomes, because at the end of the day, fashion is something which is, as we have said, it's something which is often accepted by a mass. So who's this mass? This mass is the consumer. The next term is silhouette. Silhouette essentially is something which we very often used in terms of painting. It is uh, when we generally see an outline around, as a solid black outline over a lighter background. Now this, often we have seen this, or when you take a photo on a sunset, uh, how the outline looks like is essentially a silhouette. Now, how does it interpret in terms of our sector in fashion? It is essentially how the garment looks like, how the garment, the the outline of the garment looks like. That can be, in terms of length, that can be in terms of the volume. So, for example, how the outline of a skinny person wearing a skinny fit denim and a person wearing a baggy jeans is so different. Hence, the silhouette plays a very important role. Costumes are essentially, uh, you know, defined as any part of the garment or the entire ensemble on the accessories together, which is referring to a certain period of the history. But on a more holistic way, costumes are essentially something which um, can refer to uh, a garment or a clothing or an accessory worn with a purpose. Now, this purpose can be a dance performance, it can be a costume parade, or it can be a drama, or for any other purpose. If it is worn with a purpose to represent something, it is essentially said to be a costume. Any collective term that is, any clothing which is being, whether it is of men's wear, women's wear, bottoms wear, all together, the collective term to represent all apparel items are essentially said to be clothes. RTW, or ready to wear, as we often call it RTW. It is essentially the garments that we most often buy in the retail shops. These are garments that are designed and sold in standard sizes. So these are the garments which are mass produced. So you would see that garments are sold in sizes of S, M, L, XL, and these are very standard sizes. This sizing can be country to countries, brand to brand. Uh, it doesn't generally, it is said that it needs either no tailoring or a very minimal tailoring before you wear it. So it is French, the word is called prêt-à-porter. In UK, it is called off the rack or off the peg. Prêt-à-porter, as we were saying, it is the French term for ready-to-wear. Now, many important couture or couture designers often produce less expensive prêt-à-porter lines to, in addition to what they make for their designer custom made clothing. Now, this is this is definitely done to make the brand more accessible and more known to the regular mainstream public. Couture, that is how the word has to be pronounced. Couture is the French term for business, wherein where designs are created by designers, and the idea is to use very fine sewing and tailoring and very expensive. Often it is hand sewn, very expensive fabric. And haute couture, it is the French for high sewing or high dressmaking. Now, the idea of haute couture is often that it is made for a specific customer. Again, like couture, it is made from very high quality, expensive fabrics, and a lot of attention is given to the detailing of the fabrics. Now, it is very important that uh, to be an haute couture designer, there are certain things that the haute couture designer has to do. First is that they have to show the two collections per year in one of the runway shows. Now, these two collections are the spring summer and the autumn winter collection. Spring summer and autumn winter are the two seasons of the fashion calendar, and it essentially shows two collections per year. There can be more, but these are the bare minimum. Apart from that, it is very important to produce these designs or make these designs in a specific workshop in Paris. Just a minute. Come on here. Excuse me. So yeah, so the official designs has to be produced at least produced in a workshop specifically in Paris. Now these are some of the designs. Uh, the next term we often call is another term, the French term. We pronounce it as avant-garde. Avant-garde is something which is a design which is made to show something which is unconventional or ahead of its time. Now, this can also made for garments that are often considered provocative or very startling in nature. And so these are the workshops of Paris where a haute couture design has to be made. It cannot be made in any random place and be called haute couture. To be haute couture, these are the workshops where you have to make it. These are pronounced as atelier de couture. Uh, high fashion. High fashion are garments which are again uh, garments with innovative designs. Uh, these are those with expensive fabrics, not maybe as expensive as couture. These are not for very specific clients. This can be for regular, for a bigger audience, but at the same time, this is again with expensive fabrics and is a little high priced. Bridge fashion is essentially a connection of from upper end to a budget uh, mm, friendly designs. So it is made with lesser expensive fabrics and often has its own specific runway shows. Knockoffs are essentially designs which are copied from a more expensive product manufactured with low priced components. These are often sold in street shops, also called line for line copy, or we, we can often consider them as piracy also, because you would often see these products will use their brand names converted into such, just altering it into such a way that so that it can just some way um, you know just not get into the the problem of sewing, or but then so Nike becomes Nike or KFC becomes KLG. Boutiques are shops which sells variety of merchandise. Now this includes dresses, jewelry, accessories. So it essentially gives you, it is more than just a shop to sell items, but gives you a complete experience. So it will give you the entire ensemble at the same time. It will have a certain experience of buying. So these are a few of the shops and boutiques. Coming to the next uh, point, which is collection and buying. A collection is essentially when we take several garments or styles and we group them together as a whole to called as a collection. Now, this term is often used by all couture or BDI or manufacturers, so that we, so that a connection can be made between different garments of a similar category. Now, if you see the pictures, the bottom row, it is very evident that it is a collection of bridal gowns. Each of the garment is different, but at the same time, it connects into a whole range. If you look at this designs at the top row, you realize that these are essentially designs like prom dresses made out of satin, and again, though each of the dress is different, there is something, the the entire look of it essentially binds the entire each of the garments together to give a complete look of a collection. Coming to fashion theories, now whatever however a fashion item is, there are certain theories that decides how a fashion trend will be accepted. Uh, Now, these are the three things that we are going to talk about when we are essentially talking about fashion theories. First, we are going to talk about fashion cycle. Then we are going to talk about theories in which fashion is being adopted. And finally, we are also going to talk about different fashion leaders and followers. Starting with fashion cycle. Fashion cycle is basically a graphical representation of how a fashion uh, goes through different phases. So, fashion generally evolves uh, gradually so that it gives time for the consumer to get accustomed to the new looks. Now, there are generally five phases to it. You introduce the style, there is a growth in which in section in which the popularity increases. At one point, it reaches the peak of popularity, and that is the maturity section. Finally, it declines in popularity and going to a rejection phase. Now, this is how a fashion cycle graph looks like. In the y-axis, we have acceptance, and in the x-axis, we have time. And of course, uh, acceptance cannot be measured because it's a just qualitatively it cannot be measured. So in quantitatively, we measure acceptance by measuring how many sales has happened over years or over a specific time period. So in the y-axis, we plot the volume of sales, and in the x-axis, the time that has passed. So we start with the very base, the introduction stage, when the design was just introduced to the public. It rises so that it increases in sale, and now this phase, from introduction to the rise, this phase is called the introductory phase of the fashion cycle. As it moves towards the peak, still rising, people are still buying, more and more people are buying. At one point, it reaches to a place that almost everybody has it. At this point, it would now gradually decrease and it will start declining in the range. And this phase is called the acceptance phase because people are liking it, people are still liking it. From the decline point to the point of excellence when nobody buys it anymore is the rejection phase. Yes. So at the introduction stage, new styles are introduced. Now these are introduced by movies or designers, or it is showcased in fashion shows and made very popular with celebrities. At the increase of popularity, popular styles are copied, adapted by mainstream manufacturers. They make them available to general public by using expensive or lesser expensive fabrics. They simplify the designs, sell them at lower prices with higher volumes, higher quantities, and these are generally the bridge fashion or the diffusion lines that is there. Next, we give the peak of popularity where the fashion is extremely and highly popular, and this is where the knockoff starts being producing. Next, we have the decline in popularity that so many copies are mass produced in that the fashion conscious people they start looking for other things, something new. Now, in this case, in this section, people who are still buying the product are buying it, and they're waiting to buy it on sale. Uh, Finally, at the rejection of the style or obsolescence stage, the customers have now consumers are looking at new looks and uh, new cycle have already begun. So this is where the style has just gone out of fashion and consumer obsolescence has happened. Now, all these fashion cycles though have a similar graph style, and there is these five sections that follows, but the length of the cycle can be very different. Some will take a shorter time to peak, others will take longer, and some will go up very high and decline very swiftly. Uh, at times, some just last one single season, other last several. So we often see how classics and fads are different, perform differently in different fashion cycles. So looking at how classics and fads perform, if you look at the red lines, this is how a basic fashion cycle looks like. A fad has a much shorter length of fashion cycle. Um, if you look at the classic, it reaches up, declines, but it never goes exactly obsolete. The though it declines and it reduces to much lower category, it's never really zero. So hence in classic styles are never becoming obsolete. They are remaining more or less accepted for the extended period. Fads on the other hand, they come and go out in a single season because they do not have this design strength to hold on to the consumer attention. Type of fashion cycle, often we call it as a cycle within cycles. Now, what is that? What is essentially a design element? This may change, but the idea that it remains as a product will stay. So, for example, if we think about jeans as a garment, it is a classic. It is a pair of pants made out of denim fabric. But the silhouette of denim jeans has changed over years. So right now, baggy jeans is in fashion. At one point, it was skinny. At one point, it was bell bottoms, and so on and so forth. Straight fit and drain pipe. There's a bunch of variations that has happened. Whether the denim is low waisted, mid rise, or high rise, has also played a very important role in how the denim looks like. So though uh, the style is changing, it is still a denim that is there. So smaller cycles happen within a bigger framework of a larger classic cycle. Next, we have recurring cycles. Recurring cycles is something when a fashion becomes obsolete, but it might resurface after a time period. Designers often, look at past for ideas and they bring in designs inspired from older designs. So, though it has, if you look follow the graph, so though it reaches a rejection, there is a long latent period and then it again introduced. So it's a number of recurring fashion cycles that there's, for example, peplum tops, polka dots, hot pants. And we have interrupted cycles. Interrupted cycles are cycles where consumers halt prematurely, the buying is halted prematurely because manufacturers and retailers no longer are wishing to, produce or stock the merchandise. This can also pause because this economic progression might also halt because there might be a social upheaval or a economic depression or a war that comes in. So when we look at fashion cycle, a basic product, a fad has of course has a very shorter length. Then we have a fashion product, and then we have a basic product. Basic products are products which are product free, whichever way, no matter what is the fashion trend, we would need it. So a very common example of basic products are undergarments, socks, certain basic shoes like Mary Jane's. When we look at fashion cycle, we can try to identify who are the people who are buying these fashion trends at different sections of the different stages of that fashion cycle. Starting with the fashion innovators, at the very introduction stage, it is the people who are innovating fashion, the designers. It's because only them have the access to the uh, fashion trend, or maybe some very high profile celebrities for whom these designs have been created, for them this has been styled. Then we move on to the opinion leaders. The opinion leaders are our influencers, the fashion influencers, the social media influencers in the rise phase. This is the opinion leaders that are there, followed by the masses. The masses are the people who are, the regular consumer like you and I, followed by the lead adopters. Lead adopters are essentially people who would be waiting for discounts and not really comfortable with the change that is there. And finally, the diehards who are buying it at the very, very last phase. So when we do the consumer identification, there are two very specific categories. The first one are the fashion leaders, our innovators, motivators, role models, or for that matter, fashion victims. We'll talk about fashion victims in a bit. All all falls under the section of a fashion leader. Then we have fashion followers. Now, these fashion followers would be all your masses or the leader toppers, the guards. Now, they are generally busy. They do not have time. They can also be insecure about their tests and want to fit into their friends. Starting with the fashion leaders. Now, these are the people who constantly are looking for new fashion trends, and they wear it before it becomes generally acceptable. Uh, so there are two basic categories: innovators and role models. So this can be people who are actually creating the designs or the designers, for example. Here we have Manish Arora. There can also be people who want to express their own individual style. So this can be celebrities also for whom that specific design has been created. So, for example, when Aishwarya wears a specific design for kings, or in Met Gala, somebody is wearing a specific design, it is essentially for them that design has been created. Then we have fashion motivators or role models in today's world. We have, movie stars, celebrities, public figures, as well as social media influencers who immensely, influence how, uh, what are the fashion trends that is going to be popular. So they are the role models for everyone who can identify with them. Um, there can be fashion leader for very specific and every specific market category. Then we have fashion followers. Fashion followers are the people who would imitate others. Uh, they would follow a style only after they are sure that it is a very acceptable fashion trend. Now, often they lack time, they can also lack money or interest to devote themselves into the fashion leadership. Because understanding dressing fashionably also takes a lot of time and energy. They might be very busy with their jobs and families, and they do not think fashion is very important. They also need a certain period of exposure, because the more you see a style, the more you can think that it. So they also need a certain period of exposure before the new style becomes acceptable. Now, this is necessary because the more we see a design, the more it gets accustomed to our eyes and becomes more and more acceptable. They can also be very insecure about their own taste, and they have to be very approved to be acceptable. And they want to be fitting with their friends and peers so that they don't stand out. And so they would imitate people whom they look up to. Next, we have fashion victims. Now, fashion victims are people who can have a lot of money and who spend to become just blindly following uh, what is a design. Now, this can create a physical harm or a harm of reputation, for that matter. You can never know that they are blindly following a brand without any decision or any analysis. They are late adopters or laggards. They are these people who stick to their styles even after the trend is declined, as they find it comfortable and flattering, and that has become their unique dressing style. Uh, now, as the popularity fades, the fashion product often, is get for clearance, and they invite, people who would like to bargain, or consumers of placards and late adopters, because they are slow to recognize or adapt a fashion style. Now, coming to the theories of fashion, there are basically three theories that we often understand. It is represented by these diagrams. The first one is a downward theory, or we call it as a trickle down theory of fashion adaptation. Now, it is the more traditional theory of adoption. We'll look at each one of this. The second one is a horizontal flow, represented by again a rectangle. And finally, it is an upward flow, again triangle with arrow pointed up. We call it as a trickle up theory, or a theory of reverse adoption. The first one is a traditional adoption theory, or as we call it as a trickle down theory. Now, this is the most traditional way of fashion adoption, where copying and adapting a trend-setting fashion is done. So, as a design is introduced by a designer, celebrities and role models, fashion influencers will wear it, and people are exposed to this new look, and it becomes popular. Now, so that people can get access to it cheaper, or generalized versions of this are created, and mass produced versions of this are created, so that more and more people can wear it, more and more people can afford it. So one of the examples is this checkered dress. It was initially launched by uh, Saint Laurent's brand Saint Laurent. This autumn winter 2013, and in the next season, Primark made it with cheaper designs and cheaper materials. And with followed season, it was made by Zara in a much cheaper version. So a dress essentially goes through these designs, and it is made for different client, but at the same time, it is the same design which is being followed by more and more people. Then we have the mass across theory, or as we call it, the theory of mass dissemination. Now, the modern communication of the world has, the idea of fashion influencing often comes from our peers as well. So, social media plays a very important role, wherein we see people around the globe in different wears, and we would like to dress up in a different way. It gives us the feeling of getting fitted into a specific category, or a specific, section of our society, or meet this proper social norms. So this essentially is when we see different designs on Instagram, reels, or other social media platforms, and we start dressing up with like each other. So people sitting in Seoul and New York and Delhi doesn't really have to look very different. So that is essentially the theory of mass dissemination. Finally, we have the trickle-up theory, or the theory of reverse adoption. This is where manufacturers and the retailers, they pay attention to what people are wearing in the street, to understand something, to get ideas about the street fashion. Now, some designers, influencers, uh, you know, can also take this inspiration. There are a lot of examples of this. One of the very common example is the usage of denim. Denim was essentially something that was made for workers. It was made by, the brand Levi's. It was originated by the designer Levi Strauss in the 1850s, wherein he designed a He didn't design jeans as for matter. He designed it for miners, and it was made out of a piece of strong pant made out of canvas. In following years, they realized that it can be made with denim and dyed with indigo, and they started, you know, denim jeans became a norm for workers all around the world, and a lot of miners, people in navy, and they started wearing denim. But it quickly caught attention of by 1950s, around 1950s, got the attention of the mainstream mass, and people started wearing denim as an acceptable garment, and essentially it became so popular that uh, today everybody owns a pair of jeans. The garment that we see here is a denim dungaree. It is again something that was worn by workers. Now it has become a fashion item. Same thing goes for our tribal jewelries. There are bunch of brands today that sell tribal jewelries as designer products, but essentially those are inspired from that. Or for that matter, tattoos is something which follows the idea of what people are threading. So with this, we end this session. There are three more sections that we are going to cover. The first is after this, we are also going to talk about the next session. We are going to talk about the origin and the history of clothing, wherein we are going to understand the function of clothing as well, and how it has evolved over different centuries and eras. And we are also going to look at Bollywood and Indian cinema, and how fashion played a very important role in the Indian cinema. Uh, Apart from that, we're also going to look at designers who have played very important role in reshaping fashion, Indian fashion for that matter. Uh, in the next session, we are going to talk about the design elements and principles of design. So, what are the small things that build up to create different elements of design, and what are the principles that hold those elements together. Apart from that, I'm also going to talk about in the final session about some mm, basic softwares that are used in this specific era wherein we are all these fashion items all has to be explained through different softwares which are mostly MS Office based. That is something we are also going to talk about.